directly and indirectly with the gaming industry are vitally important to the state. So whatever we do in this committee is going to be first and foremost focused on Mississippians and working and supporting our economy, and that's what we want to talk about. So the first person that we have on our agenda is the director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission, Mr. Alan Godfrey. Mr. Godfrey, if you come forward. What we're going to do is we built in a little bit of a long lunch break on purpose so that all the members will have time to ask any questions that you want to ask. And we'll have a good dialogue, and I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. So, Mr. Godfrey, you're recognized. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My first statement is simply this. It is the Mississippi Gaming Commission's responsibility to regulate whatever is legislated to us. So in any shape, form, or fashion, whatever the type gaming is, that's what we're going to do. Currently, the only type of legal gaming is commercial gaming at the licensed operators and charitable gaming. You've asked me to speak on mobile sports wagering, and since we don't have it in the state of Mississippi, my comments and thoughts are going to be based solely on research, communication with other regulators that have it in the state. I say we don't have it. We technically, you can place a sports wager on a device in the state of Mississippi, but it has to be on premise. And that's the big distinction between many states. Some states allow them only at the brick and mortar, and some states allow them at the brick and mortar and all over the state via a mobile app. Okay. So how do we get to talking about mobile sports wagering? The passage in 2017, I believe, of the Daily Fantasy Sports Act changed some language in the Gaming Control Act that allowed legal wagers in the state of Mississippi. Now, at that time, it was a moot point because the federal government still prohibited it. In May of 2018, the Supreme Court overturned what they call PASPA, which at that point in time made it legal if a state wanted it to, they could enact legal sports wagering. Well, due to the fact that Mississippi had already done that the prior year, Mississippi was ready to accept legal sports wagers. So in, I believe, August or September of 2018, the first legal sports wager was placed in this state. The tax revenue from sports wagering through the Lottery Act was committed to the Roads and Bridges Fund. After a few months of 2018, what the industry saw was an immediate impact on increased foot traffic and new patrons, people who had not been coming into their properties, okay? 2019, the first full year of sports wagering in the state of Mississippi, saw gross gaming revenue exceed 2018 by 3.5%. That's in excess of $70 million, with only 40 plus million attributable to sports wagering. So the rest of the games saw an increase in their wagers. Now in 2020, we were set to exceed 2019. We were on a roll, and as you know, by the fact we're all wearing a mask, walking around like we are, things kind of went down for a couple of months. The casinos were closed, but I will tell you, June, July, August of 2020 was better than June, July, August of 2019. So the industry was rebounding, okay? And that's with reduced capacity and probably 10,000 less slot machines. All right. Now, what the properties did, some of the properties in 2018, after they saw what sports wagering was doing to this for their property with the increased foot traffic, with new patrons, they went on and started planning and reinvesting in their brick and mortar sports book. Some of them investing millions of dollars. And we've got some of the finest sports books in the country. They may not be the largest, but we have some of the finest sports books in the United States. So those were all completed in 2019, and we were just rolling along. So as you can tell, sports wagering was good. 2019, the legal sports wagered in the state of Mississippi was $370 million, okay? That sounds real good, but if you put it in perspective to what the state of New Jersey did in sports wagering, mobile sports wagering, in September of 2020, they did $850 million. But you have to understand, they got a population of roughly 9 million compared to our 3 million. The states around New Jersey, you've got New York, which does allow sports wagering on premise in upstate New York. The city of New York borders New Jersey. People get in their vehicles, they cross over the bridge, they place their wager legally in the state of New Jersey, and they drive back across. Okay. Maryland borders New Jersey. They enacted sports wagering, but it is not legal. They don't have the logistics of it set up yet, the nuts and bolts. Pennsylvania has been very successful in their sports wagering products. So in my perspective, and this is from a regulator's point of view, the success of it depends on visitation and population. Okay? Nobody loves their sports more than anyone here in the South, but 370 million in a year is a far cry from 850 million in a month. All right, so when you look at the state of Mississippi, we've got 4 states bordering. Each one of them have a gaming option available. Alabama has the Poarch Creek Indians. Tennessee, effective November 1 of this year, offered statewide mobile wagering. Okay? They don't have brick and mortar casinos, so they just have a bunch of apps that they can use and place their wager anywhere in the state. Arkansas's got 3 casinos currently, should have 4 in the near future. Each one of them allows sports wagering. Louisiana, it's a very, very strong market. Through this, I think, a constitutional amendment, they now have sports wagering. It won't be enacted for another year plus, but everybody's got some type of option available to us, or to them. All right, from a regulator's point of view, and that's what we're going to look at the commission. All right, a couple of things we look at is, are all the wagers, if mobile sports wagering is allowed statewide off-premise, are all the wagers actually being placed within the state of Mississippi, within the borders of Mississippi? All right, so are they legal wagers? Second, are wagering accounts, however they're set up, whether remotely or in person. Are they set up by someone 21 years of age and older and are not on a compulsive gaming list? All right? And then we look at the technology, see if the technology is good. All right? Well, as I said, New Jersey, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and many states currently have mobile sports wagering, on-premise and off-premise. So the technology's good. Some of them make you come in and sign in on your wagering account in person once. Some allow you to do it remotely. Either one of them's effectively. I'm not advocating for one versus another. But what we've seen is you can efficiently and effectively regulate mobile sports wagering. Okay, it's been done. And this is what we did when sports wagering was actually, we thought it was going to become legal. We got on an airplane, we went to New Jersey, we went to Nevada. We asked some questions. We went there 2 or 3 times. We come back, we're very comfortable in how we're regulating the process. So we can do it effectively. So the concerns that people may think the commission has, I don't have any concerns. I don't have an opinion on one way or another, but we don't have a concern on regulating it. One of the things that we look at the commission is we also oversee, or we try to go after illegal gaming. And I told you 370 million was legally wagered in the state, and I would be willing to bet you that's a drop in the bucket of what's being placed illegally in this state. So it's very challenging. We don't have an extremely large crew that or a bunch of agents that I can go out and chase this. My staff on that regard is very, very small. In talking to some of the other states that have legalized mobile sports wagering, their comments to me were they seem to feel like the illegal side has gone down, okay? Now, a lot of that, the illegal is so big because, and it's always going to be with us. You're not going to get rid of it because you do it anonymously. There's no paper trail. If you win a lot of money, tax man's not coming. Yeah. And they play on credit versus going into the casino, placing your wager, you got to put the money down. So if they're telling me in some of these larger places that the illegal side is going down, I'd say that's a plus. In concluding my thoughts is that, we have a good working relationship with most every jurisdiction out there, and we will continue to do so. And if in fact there is a bill that is passed, this agency can get up to speed via our contacts with other state agencies in a very short time. So, I'll accept any questions that any one of you may have.
Senator Moran.
You touched on something that I personally feel will make a big difference. We've all grown up in an area where Buddy Joe calling the bets on a ball game Saturday and Sunday, and tally up with him. I know of folks in the Jackson area, northern part of the state, that have to participate in it that way because otherwise they got to get in their car and drive to the coast or drive to Tunica. Philadelphia. I fully believe that if it's legalized and they can use this, it's going to cut really deep into the local bookie.
Well, my comment would be that the bookies that we have been in contact with via criminally or just through confidential informants, they are not concerned with our sports wagering offering now. It has not hurt their business from my understanding. Would a mobile option help? Yes, in my opinion, yes, it would. It will not get rid of it, but I think it will help it. It's going on now. I guess at the end of the day, it's going on a lot closer in the perimeter than Jackson, Mississippi.
Any other questions for Mr. Godfrey? Mr. Godfrey, a couple of things I wanted to ask. The numbers you gave for sports wagering in the state today were, I guess, gross numbers. Do you have the net revenue to the general fund from what was sports
It was
wagering?
$3.5 million in 2019.
FY19?
Yes, well, calendar year. No, where's Jay? Yeah, calendar year, I'm sorry. I don't know what the FY, but it couldn't have been much more or less than that.
The net, the tax on sports, in-person sports wagering was $3.5 million.
Yes, that went to the general fund. Now, there was probably another $1.5 million that went to the local governments, but yes.
And then you mentioned, I think, that there's some small amount of overall casino business that increased, you feel, as a result of people going to the, they go bet on sports, and then maybe they stay in a hotel, maybe they do some other gambling, maybe they go out to eat.
Yes, so the only difference in 2019 and 2018 was the addition of the sports book.
Yeah.
And out of the 70+ million of gross gaming revenue increase, only 40-some million was attributable to sports book. The rest of it was other gaming. So yes, it saw an increase.
How does illegal mobile betting work now, and how do you as a regulator deal with it? Like I see some of these websites where I guess they're can you bet on your phone now in Mississippi?
Yes, sir.
And I assume that's all illegal, right?
Do I know?
I assume that's illegal.
It's illegal. If you bet on your phone now, it's illegal in this
But
state.
people are doing it. So how do they do it?
Using websites overseas.
Okay. And what do you as
And
a
local
regular?
bookies will be using websites overseas. The bookies locally will take the money, and they'll deal with it overseas.
And how do you as a regulator go after that sort of thing?
Well, we have starting to send cease and desist letters to as many people as we can. Again, I've got a staff. I've got allotted 128 pins to this agency. Only 101 are filled, and my criminal investigations division is only 4 deep. So my main emphasis on my enforcement agents are in the legal side of it, not the illegal side. So we do the best we can, Senator, but it's a challenge.
Yep.
And it's also a low priority for local, law enforcement, and I get that.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions of the committee for Mr. Godfrey?
One more, I was just talking to Senator, I was just talking to Senator Delano about it, and got it, anyway. We feel like that on the coast that the illegal betting has dropped because we're so close to be able to go and actually place a bet. It would drop tremendously more with the use of this. Just simply the convenience of it. You're busy Saturday, you're mowing grass in the fall and you're cleaning the yard, and all of a sudden you think, golly, I'd like to bet on State or Ole Miss. Well, you don't have time to go take a shower and clean up and run to the casino or somewhere, but if you had time to grab that phone and get in on that app to that brick and mortar casino, whichever one you want to bet with within the state, people will, I have no doubt in my mind, people will use that.
I surely can't argue with you.
And one of the things that worries me is that now that Louisiana has passed it, and Tennessee and Alabama, Arkansas, I'm really worried that we're going to get behind the 8 ball. We were one of the first ones to be on board with this, and I certainly would like to see us continue to stay out front and go ahead and and have some kind of really good bill this year to get it moving so that Mississippi stays on the forefront of it, not behind.
We definitely had momentum going in the right direction.
Thank you.
Mr. Delano?
Director Godfrey, I just want to tell you, first of all, thank you very much for the work that you and your agency do with making sure that the investments that are made in Mississippi are done in a proactive way, and a good return, a stable foundation for regulatory climate in our state, and that's been one of our strong suits or ever since gaming came up. And I want to tell you thank you very much. You've employed your agency has helped employ a lot of people in our district. So I just want to tell you thank you for that. With respect to mobile sportsbook, there's going to be a lot of questions that will come up throughout the day. But the one thing that people have asked me about over and over again is about whether or not we should require an face-to-face or an brick and mortar registration. Do you have a comment on that, on how other states have handled the registration component, and is it done in bricks and mortar versus being able to do things, even if it's in person, but maybe not necessarily on premise? Could you give us just a little bit of your insight into how you would want to regulate that?
Sure. Well, I can tell you what's going on in other states. Nevada, you have to come in, or at least you used to, unless it's changed, you had to come in one time and physically create your account, fund your account, open it up. Now they know who you are and that you're above the age of 21, that you're not a compulsive gambler, and now you can do that remotely. Now, Nevada's unique in that probably the 3 or 4 largest in cities constitute probably 90% of the population, and every one of those has a casino in them. So it's real easy for somebody to go to a brick and mortar. In Mississippi, ours are so located in certain areas, it would be very challenging for those people on the east side of our state to legally, they're going to have to drive 2 or 3 hours to get to them. New Jersey, I know, does it remotely, and they've experienced no issues one way or another. I don't think we would take a position one way or another as long as you're able to verify that the person is of legal age and not on a compulsive gaming list.
Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How do you verify the age if they don't come in person? If I just got a mobile device and just answer, I'm over 21,
If I started trying to explain to you that process, you would know I was full of horse manure really quick, okay? I don't know anything about that kind of technology, but New Jersey, there are very many people who are much more smarter than I am on technology with the checks and cross-checks on how they do it with credit cards, I believe, and their locations. And New Jersey says that they do a great job with it. And I think most states are actually doing it remotely. So there must be good enough technology out there to verify that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. We look forward to talking to you again in January.
Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Mr. Joe Asher. He is the CEO of William Hill. Mr. Asher.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for having me. As the chairman said, my name is Joe Asher. I'm the CEO of William Hill US, and I appreciate the invitation to appear before you today. William Hill is one of the leading sports betting companies in the world. It was founded in England over 85 years ago, came into the U.S. In 2012, initially in Nevada. In Mississippi, we provide what we call risk management or trading services, as well as technology to a number of casinos here in Mississippi since 2018. And the risk management and trading basically means we're the bookmaker. We set the odds for the events. Currently, we serve 12 casinos in Mississippi, and that includes the 4 that are owned by Caesars Entertainment, as well as places like the Hard Rock, Island View, the Palace Casino, and the Silver Slipper. The properties that we serve account for about 30% of the sports betting revenue in Mississippi. Our U.S. business is headquartered in Las Vegas, where we're the market leader. We operate about 160 retail sports books. Most of those are in Nevada. And we offer sports betting in 14 U.S. Jurisdictions, 13 states plus the District of Columbia, and mobile sports betting in 8 of those. In the last 2 years, Mississippi, its residents, and our partner casinos have experienced many benefits from regulated sports betting. Since August of 2018, legal sports betting has helped grow the state's gaming revenues, create jobs, and provide consumers with a safe and responsible way to bet on sports and an alternative to the black market. Sports betting has helped bring in new customers to casinos and led to a significant increase in food and beverage revenues, as well as gaming revenue at our partner properties. Since the casinos reopened this year, the popularity of sports betting has never been higher, and it's helped bring customers back to the casinos. October was a record month for sports betting in Mississippi, with more than 61 million wagered, resulting in gross revenues of just under $9 million. Now that Mississippi's sports betting market is well established, the conversation has rightly turned to the future and to statewide mobile sports betting. And Mississippi, as Director Godfrey noted, faces competition, retail from Arkansas, mobile from Tennessee, and soon to be from Louisiana. Nationwide, William Hill takes about 75% of its wagers on mobile devices. So even though there's 160 retail locations, 3/4 of the business is on your mobile phone. What we've seen, however, is that when it comes to mobile sports betting, one size does not fit all, and what works in one state does not necessarily work in another. Each jurisdiction is different in how it approaches gambling policy, where casinos are located, the number of them, and a variety of other key factors. In Nevada's thriving sports betting market, where mobile sports betting has existed since 2010, as Director Godfrey noted, customers first must establish their mobile betting account while physically present at a casino. Once the account is established, the customer can wager from anywhere within the state's borders. Customers can deposit funds away from the casino, and they can also deposit and withdraw at the casino. And so what you do see is a number of people coming in, even though they have a mobile account, they come in to deposit, they come in to withdraw money from their accounts. And that model works well in Nevada because, unlike in Mississippi, casinos are located throughout the state and near all of the major population areas, and the number of casino licenses is not limited. Another model is one where customers can sign up for their sports betting accounts remotely without ever having to visit a casino, and that's what Director Godfrey noted is law in New Jersey. This approach eliminates the need for that initial visit to the casino, but it does not lead to the enhanced ancillary revenues that sports betting can provide to casinos. It's been the model in New Jersey since 2018, and recently in Colorado and Indiana, where they launched sports betting this year. There is a third model, which is a hybrid of the other two. In this model, in-person mobile signups are required for a certain amount of time, and once that period expires, then remote registration is permitted. That's the model in Iowa, which legalized sports betting in the summer of 2018. The in-person registration requirement in Iowa is scheduled to sunset on January the 1st of 2021. And this was also the approach that was taken by the legislature in Illinois when they legalized sports betting. But the governor has issued a series of controversial executive orders suspending the in-person sign-up requirement due to COVID. Now, the New Jersey model makes sense in New Jersey because in New Jersey, all the casinos are located in one place. They're all in Atlantic City. There are a couple of racetracks as well, but all the casinos are located in Atlantic City, which is 2 hours or more away from the major population areas in the northern part of the state. And as Director Godfrey noted, a good chunk of the mobile sports betting business in New Jersey is folks coming over from New York City to place their bets and then going back over the bridge after they do so. So in contrast to Nevada and Mississippi, here you have many casinos spread throughout the state versus all being located in one place, in particular in Atlantic City. Now, there are drawbacks to operators in a remote registration approach. In a remote registration market, sports betting operators must significantly increase their spending on marketing in order to compete. And that lowers the profitability of sports betting and in many cases actually makes it unprofitable, at least in these first 2 years in a place like New Jersey. Now, the advantage in a remote registration market goes to the companies with the biggest marketing war chest to spend, and they're willing to spend significantly to grow top-line revenue without regard to profitability in the near term. In New Jersey, few, if any, of the operators actually make money on mobile sports betting when you factor in the costs of attracting customers and then operating and maintaining those customers. The companies making the most money on sports betting in the state of New Jersey are actually the major media and digital advertising companies, particularly Facebook and Google. Remote registration for mobile accounts would also eliminate much of the sports betting's benefit to attracting customers to come to the casinos, whether it's by initially registering or coming back to deposit and withdraw. By initially permitting in-person sports betting, Mississippi has taken a broader long-term approach to the industry and recognized the economic benefits of encouraging visitation to the casinos, investment in the casinos, and the creation of jobs and attracting new visitors. Now, giving all of these considerations, we think the best approach is to require in-person registration for mobile accounts for at least a period of 18 to 24 months to encourage continued visitation to the casinos, to ensure a level playing field, and to respect the substantial investments that have been made in Mississippi casinos. After that time period, you could reevaluate the question of in-person versus remote signups based on the circumstances at that time, or you could authorize the Gaming Commission to make that determination if you don't want to revisit the issue. We think this approach strikes the right balance given the various considerations. Once again, thanks for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Asher, for coming out and speaking with us today. You mentioned that you have experience with both on-site registration as well as off-site. How do they verify age in that the off-site?
The customer enters their data into their phone, and then that gets checked against a number of third-party sources that have the information, be it credit report type information and other identity verification companies that license their services to operators such as ours. So there are companies that specialize in that information.
All right, thank you. And you mentioned you have 160 retail sports, I guess, books out there. Can someone go to those sport books and register and to create an account versus going to the casino?
Well, the sports books are located in casinos. So these are all sports books that are located in casinos. The vast majority of those are in Nevada, where the law is you go into the casino, you present yourself there, you sign up for your account, and then you fund it, and then you can bet anywhere within the state.
So you really don't have any satellite retail operations where folks go to register or place bets?
No, not outside of the brick and mortar casinos or one racetrack in New Jersey.
All right, thank you, sir.
Senator Delano.
Me?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming and speaking with us today. Will you walk me through the sign-on process for a mobile sports book for your group, and also do you or your operators provide credit to any of their players, or is it just a straight link to a bank account?
So the process is you download the app from the App Store. If you're on an Apple device or on an Android device, you download the app as well. And then there's a series of things to fill out to open up your account: your name, your address. You have to enter your Social Security number, or at least the last 4 digits of your Social Security number under the federal regulations in this area. And there may be a certain number of other questions that you ask. You establish your password and things of that nature. You submit that, then on the back of the house side, we're verifying that versus the third-party systems that I identified. And then you can deposit money electronically, either through an ACH transaction, perhaps from your bank. And more credit card companies are now starting to process sports betting transactions. Historically, and still to date, the major banks do not process the transactions as easily because it's a relatively new industry and because of the federal oversight in this area. But you can establish your account online and fund it online as well through a variety of means. And then once the account is set up, you've been verified, you can then place your bets throughout the state.
Senator Moran.
Thank you so much for coming and talk with us today, Joe. And My question is, I think you had mentioned it earlier. Tell us again, how many different properties do you all service in the state? Which ones are?
In Mississippi?
Yes.
12.
12?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On the registration, so you could use possibly come in and use possibly a credit card and/or a bank link. And then, once you do that, if it's that 18-month process, do you have to come back each time during that 18 months? Or just once you have come in and established that, then if you live in Jackson and you want to bet on a Saturday afternoon game, you can do it from there rather than drive to one?
Correct. So if you live in Jackson, you drive the 45 minutes or so out to Vicksburg, depending on what part of town you're coming from, and you register that one time, and then that's it. You don't have to go back after that, but you make that first initial visit to the property. And then for funding, you can either fund in person in the casino, you can fund remotely on your phone. There are also companies that, for instance, in Nevada, you can go into a 7-Eleven or a CVS pharmacy and deposit money into your mobile sports betting account through a third-party service called Pay Near Me. We use that. Also, in Nevada, you can go into a number of bars and taverns to fund your mobile account. You cannot open the account there. You can't bet on a kiosk or anything like that there. You cannot withdraw money there, but you can deposit. So there are a number of mechanisms for folks to get money into their accounts. Some people use the ACH or a third-party company that provides a similar service. Folks use credit cards as well, as long as the banks process those transactions. Or you use these third-party intermediaries where you go and play with cash. Frankly, a lot of people like to deposit money into their accounts using cash, if for no other reason than the spouse doesn't know about it, right? So they go and they put cash into a kiosk or cash over the counter at the 7-Eleven and fund their account. But you only physically have to go to the casino once, but you can go to deposit or to withdraw thereafter. And of course, the casinos are marketing you to try to get you to come to their properties because of the ancillary revenue that it provides and the importance of having foot traffic into the casinos, right? You drive out to the casino in Vicksburg, maybe you'll have lunch there, maybe you'll go to the tables and so forth.
Thank you.
Mr. Asher, I have a few questions. So William Hill, in some cases, like in Mississippi, you work for, are you licensed, or do you work for, are you contracted with the casino that has the license?
Both. We're licensed by the Gaming Commission to provide services to the license holder itself.
So you're, I don't want to get too technical, but the license holder is the casino.
Correct.
And like a company that makes slot machines or anything like that, you have to be approved by the Gaming Commission. So is it a license, or is it just a certification that you can then go work for the licensee? Does that make?
Well, I had to
I mean,
appear
you're splitting
before the
hairs.
Gaming Commission personally for licensing in Jackson some period of time. Perhaps Mr. Godfrey would or Jay would know the precise
Well, I mean,
language
I don't mean
used,
to.
but
I don't mean to
there's a
split hairs.
licensing process for providers, but the casino license holder is the casino.
And then they can engage you or a company that makes slot machines or anything else, whatever they need to do to run their casino.
Yes.
So in other states, are you able through an app or something like that to just operate a sports book yourself, separate from a casino? I assume in states without casinos, you just have an app on a phone and people can bet on the app on the phone. And you're regulated by whatever the state regulatory agency is that regulates mobile sports betting in that state?
Mr. Chairman, in most of the states, the sports betting licenses are held by the casinos.
Okay.
and then we're licensed to provide a service to those casinos. In the District of Columbia, where there are no casinos, in D.C., in the case that's relevant to us, the license holder is actually the owner of the sports arena in Washington, D.C., the Capital One Arena. The legislature in D.C. Granted a license to a number of sports venues. Those venues are, in effect, the license holder, and then we're licensed to provide services there. In Tennessee, the licenses are being granted by the state to sports betting companies directly. But in all the states where there's an existing casino industry, the sports betting licenses flow through the casino.
But this doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Can be whatever legislature decides.
Right. On the question of registration, so if you have in-person registration, if I live in Jackson and the casino that's closest to me is in Vicksburg, I drive to Vicksburg, and let's just say for sake of argument that we have, I think, roughly 25 casinos in the state, and there are 25 different places I can go set up an account, and I set up an account at a casino in Vicksburg because it's closest to my house. Does that mean that I'm committed to all future betting that I do through the app on my phone is through that one casino in Vicksburg? And if I wanted to use a different app because it's more, for whatever reason, I find I'm compared to all the different apps out there, then I'd have to drive to another casino to establish an account and get that app? Or does that initial in-person registration commit me for the rest of my wagering life unless I go to another casino to wager on the app associated with that casino?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the logic behind it is, there's many billions of dollars of investment into casinos.
Right.
And the tie to a physical casino, the license flowing through a casino, is fundamentally designed to respect that investment and encourage subsequent future investment.
Right. One topic that I'm still learning about that we haven't discussed yet this morning that I'd like to hear your thoughts on is the question of skins. If you could tell us what that idea is and how it would work and what opinion that you may have about it.
Sure. So a skin is effectively the right to offer sports betting under a particular brand. And the states take very different views on this topic of the number of skins that each casino license holder gets. In New Jersey, each casino has 3 skins that they can either use themselves or effectively lease to a third party. And then that third party can operate under that skin as well. Some states have taken the approach of there's only 1 skin. Others have had 2 skins. I think the most is 3 skins. And what it effectively does is it increases the number of licenses available in a particular state. And effectively, the excess licenses, let's say I own a casino and there's 3 skins, I can operate under my brand for my first skin, and then I can sub-license the remaining 2 skins to third parties who have to get approved by the relevant regulator. But effectively, those second and third skins become a currency that I can sell to third parties. And it allows those third parties the ability to come into the state and operate. So in a place like Nevada, where the requirement is to come in person to sign up, and there is no remote registration, there are no skins effectively beyond that first skin. In a state where there's remote registration, New Jersey, for instance, there are the 3 skins. You can sign up remotely using any of those three skins that I, the casino holder, may have licensed. The number of skins, ultimately, it's just a policy decision. In a state where there are a large number of casinos already, and therefore a large number of potential licenses, should you give the licenses to the casinos? The question becomes far less sensitive than in a state with a very small number of casinos, and therefore only a limited number of people could operate in the market otherwise. So New York, Director Godfrey noted, there are the casinos in New York. There are 4 commercial casinos, and they're all in upstate New York. And then there are 3 tribes that have casinos also in upstate New York. But in the entire state, there's only 7 casino license holder. Some of the tribes have 1 or 2 or 3 smaller properties. In that situation, you could see a pretty compelling argument to have multiple skins in order to increase the number of operators in the market. Less of a concern, frankly, in a state like with Mississippi, given the number of casinos, but there's certainly a case to be made for having 2 or 3 skins available, and then folks could sublicense them as they saw fit.
So these numbers won't be exact, but for round numbers, we have roughly 25 casinos, and there are companies that own more than one casino. Let's say there are 10 owners out there and 25 sites. We could would the skin be based on the number of companies, or would it be based on the number of sites, or would, if we allowed each licensee or each casino to have more than one, we could have 10 apps that you could bet Mobley on, or 25 apps that you could bet Mobley on, or 50 apps, and at what point does it matter? I mean, if you have 10 different apps that you can choose from based on 10 companies, or 25 apps based on 10 individual casino sites, or we gave every casino 3 skins and then we had 75 apps, what difference does it make, and what would be the effect to the casino industry, and what would be the effect, do you think, for the state in terms of would we have more people wagering if we had 75 apps instead of 10 apps or 25 apps?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any state where the law looks to the owner separate from the casino. So somebody owns 4 casinos, typically they would have, in effect, each of those casinos would have a license. I'm not aware of a scenario where it's sort of one license for someone who owns 4 casinos, for instance. At some point, yeah, it doesn't matter, right? Where it does have an impact, perhaps, is the scarcity value of those licenses goes away if you have 75 in your hypothetical. Then if a casino is selling that license to a third party or sub-licensing it to a third party, the cost is very, very small because there's a lot of them available in the market to be purchased, versus if there's a relatively finite number of skins available, the cost, of course, goes up. The licensor, the casino who's got the skin to provide to a third party, of course, they need to ensure that they're doing business with a company that's going to be licensed, that has the bona fides, that's actually going to pay them, right? So there's, you're doing your probity checks on those third parties. But in a number of states, there are more skins available than are actually in use, right? You're not going to get 75 operators in the market just because you have 75 available. I think in New Jersey, which probably has the most operators, the total number of operators is probably somewhere around 20, maybe smaller than that, and a good number of them are very, very small. Right? The major operators are much smaller subset.
Thank you for that.
Question.
Any, Senator Moore, you want to follow up on that?
When you were talking about different numbers of operators in different states, and we have somewhere, say 25, are we considered across the spectrum of the country where they're located, are we considered small, medium, what,
Well,
as
certainly.
far as our number of casinos?
The number of casinos in Mississippi is quite large relative to other states. I think only Nevada would have more casinos than Mississippi, at least that I can think of. So you'd have Nevada, which has a large number of casinos. They're not all what most people think of as casinos, right? They're not all the Caesar's Palace on the Las Vegas Strip. I mean, some of them qualify as casinos under state law, but they're quite small in a rural county, for instance. But outside Nevada, I think Mississippi has the largest number of casinos.
Thank you.
Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Asher, for joining us this morning. And I think we're probably a little bit further off the scope of your initial presentation. So I do appreciate you sharing with us what you have. I do have a question on whether or not your company has any idea on the potential gross gaming revenue increase Mississippi may stand to receive from mobile sports betting. And not unrelated from that, whether in some of these other states that have enacted mobile sports betting, maybe particularly like in New Jersey that allows multiple skins, whether or not those states have had to increase their enforcement efforts once they brought in mobile sports betting and allowed a number of skins for each operator.
In terms of the size of the market, I think our general view is mobile sports betting probably serves to double the market. If we look at the market currently of somewhere around 45 million in revenue, I think mobile would most likely double it. I mean, there are different views on that. Some people say it's less, some people say it's more, and the studies that suggest more, I think, are debatable as to the methodology they use. So the one that we use internally is roughly double. In terms of enforcement efforts, I mean, look, I've always been an advocate for increased enforcement and using some of the revenue that states collect from sports betting to increase enforcement efforts vis-a-vis illegal operators, because we operate in a very highly regulated industry. With we pay tax to the IRS on every wager. Obviously, there's taxes at the state level, and then the costs of compliance versus the illegal operator who pays zero in taxes to the IRS, zero in taxes to the state of Mississippi, and has no compliance obligations whatsoever. So increased resources for enforcement, I think, is something that that is ultimately pays for itself by then pushing more people to the legal market where it is legal and regulated and taxed, and making it that much harder on the illegal market. But the illegal market, it will be here for the foreseeable future for sure. It's not going to go away. I mean, it's not like in New Jersey all the illegal bookies have sort of decided, well, I'm going to go back to school and become an accountant. I mean, they're still there, but customers, if they have the choice to go into the legal market, what we're seeing in a number of states is they in fact do so. In Nevada, for instance, where I happen to have lived for the last 14 years, you really don't see the illegal market. You don't see illegal bookmakers as prominently in a place like Nevada as you do in other states, just because the legal market is so prevalent and well established that folks don't really have much incentive to go into the illegal market.
Any other questions for Mr. Asher? Thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry, Senator Delano, go ahead. You're recognized.
Yeah, I want to go back to your core business rules quick and discuss something on lines and odds that are offered. This may be a little proprietary, and you can say I can't answer it. I understand that, but I've tried to word this very carefully. How much variation would I expect to see in lines or odds that are offered in the 12 properties that you manage sportsbook in our state versus other regions of the country as well? And then also, should I expect to see any variation between the in-person sportsbook venues that are in our bricks and mortar versus the mobile sportsbook apps?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. We offer the same odds in all of our casinos in Mississippi. All 12 would have the same odds. And generally, there's very little variance even across the country. I mean, in some drastic examples, there might be a very, very small bias in one state versus another. But maybe that would be a half a point on a really big game. And the reason for that is, the customer, it's to compete with the black market, right? The customer knows what the line is on the Saints game, for instance. And if you try to move it a point or two, you're just going to turn that customer off and push them away into the black market. I mean, I had one of our partners a couple years ago said, listen, everybody down here, this is sort of in the Gulf region, says, all my customers love the Saints. They're just going to bet the Saints every weekend. What are we going to do? I said, well, we're going to root for Tampa Bay. Right?
Didn't work
out. Because if you're just moving the line more, than a hair, you're going to turn off that customer. And we don't look at it on any one game, right? We look at it across the entire season or across the entire calendar year. And so there's going to be ups and downs. In terms of the pricing between mobile apps and in the retail sports book, similarly, we've also taken the view that you want to offer the same prices there, so that a customer doesn't have his phone in his hand and have one price, and he looks up at the board in front of him and there's a different price. So I think the best practice is to try to mirror the prices. And then in terms of William Hill versus our competitors, the odds are generally in the same area. There might be some variance that a particular operator has based on how much money they have on one side of the game or another, or a different pricing philosophy, right? They might try to price their product higher, have a higher theoretical margin than we do. We try to be very aggressive and offer what we consider to be a very fair price to our customers. Because again, we're not looking at it as any one event or one day, but you're looking at it across an entire year. So there's some variance between operators, either in pricing philosophy or the specific odds on a game, but it's within fairly tight parameters.
And on that same line, give me an idea of the type of games or the bets or wagers that can be offered. And of course, you've got lines or odds on outcomes, but do you also provide prop bets? And would I expect a mobile sportsbook platform to provide a user with an opportunity to place bets on the next strikeout in this, how many strikeouts there will be in this coming inning, or 3-point shots in the first half? I mean, are those kind of games that would be offered as well?
On a mobile platform, the biggest difference in where you're generally alluding to is something that we call in-play betting, or betting after the game has already started. What people are, and this is often misunderstood, I think, what people are betting on in play, for the most part, is the outcome of the game itself or a defined subset of the game. So people aren't really betting ball versus strike. It's too granular It's actually disruptive to the viewing experience. You know, is Steph Curry going to make or miss this particular shot? That's not what they're betting on. They're still betting on the outcome of the game or a subset of the game. And what I mean by that is, will there be a run scored in the next inning of a baseball game? Yes or no? That's something that people will bet inning by inning. Yes, no, no, yes, no, yes. Because you're taking a 3-hour game and you're chopping it down to a 20-minute betting event, for instance. Tennis is a very popular sport for in-play betting, and people will bet set by set or game by game, so that, again, you don't have to commit to the entire 3 hours of the event, but rather a defined subset. And so I think, you know, clearly mobile betting facilitates the in-play experience, right? You don't have to be standing there in the sports book, you know, looking at the game on the TV and then running up to the counter to place your bet. You can just bet it on the phone, whether you're in the casino or in a sports bar or sitting at home.
Mr. Asher, thank you for coming to Mississippi, and thank you for your presentation this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, our IT folks are setting up Jackson Brainerd, who will be presenting to us via Zoom. Mr. Brainerd is with the National Conference of State Legislatures, and I'll tell you, as a member of the National Executive Committee for NCSL, this is a great organization. And if you don't take advantage of what they have to offer, I would encourage you to do that. Whatever issue that comes before the legislature, whether it's gaming, whether it's elections, Medicaid, infrastructure funding, whatever it is that you're thinking about, there's somebody in CSL who knows more about it than you do. And so when we started coming up with the agenda for this meeting, NCSL was the first group that I thought of that we could hear from an objective policy analyst who has no financial interest in whatever we may or may not do, but can kind of just give us the lay of the land nationally. So, Mr. Brainerd, can you hear us, or are we good to go with you?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good. So we appreciate. Are you in Denver?
I'm in Denver, Mr. Chairman.
Denver,
Yes,
okay.
Thank you for those nice words.
Sure. Well, we're happy to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Appreciate you having me here remotely to speak. My name is Jackson Brainerd. I'm a senior policy specialist with the National Conference of State Legislatures. I work in our fiscal affairs program, mostly cover tax, economic development, and gambling issues. I'll be providing an overview on the status of sports betting in the states, looking at trends in mobile sports betting implementation, and also looking at trends in mobile sports betting revenue performance. If you're not familiar with NCSL, we are a bipartisan organization that serves the legislators and legislative staffs, states and territories. We provide research on all manner of policy topics. We lobby on behalf of state interests at the federal level and promote learning and communication between states. I just want to clarify before I begin that we do not have an official position on state sports betting policies. So let me share my screen real quick with you all. All right. So sports betting has been one of the faster growing areas of state policy making in recent years. The Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was struck down by the Supreme Court in May 2018. In the following 2.5 years, half the country has taken action to legalize sports betting, which is a rate you don't often see. This map, courtesy of the American Gaming Association, shows the current status of sports betting implementation across the country. It is now currently being offered in 19 states in DC. It is legal, but not yet operational in another 6 of them. A handful of these states do not have state-approved gambling, but have worked with Native American governments to authorize it at tribal casinos. That includes North Carolina, New Mexico, and Washington. Still, with the coronavirus interrupting state legislative sessions and shutting down casinos across the country in the spring, 2020 was a much slower year compared to 2019 in the sports betting realm. We only saw 2 new sports betting laws enacted legislatively. Virginia authorized sports betting allowed bets to be placed remotely on internet platforms. Washington State passed legislation to allow tribal casinos to offer it. And then you all might have heard about the elections we had last month. Sports betting measures were approved by voters in 3 more states, including one of your neighbors, approved on a parish by parish basis in Louisiana, and 52 of the 64 parishes did so. South Dakota voters added sports betting to the list of constitutionally approved games that can be offered by casinos in Deadwood, which hosts all of the state's casinos. And in Maryland, voters authorized casinos and video lottery facilities to offer it there. In all 3 of these cases, the tax and regulatory landscape still needs to be hashed out, but it seems likely that mobile betting will be approved, at least in Maryland. And then in addition to these 5 states, there were another 19 that considered legislation to legalize or study the possibility of sports betting in 2020. Proposals in at least 8 states would have authorized mobile betting. Some of these measures are still under consideration. Proposal just recently made it out of committee in Georgia that would allow the lottery to offer mobile sports betting. Only 26 states have legal casino operations. So when it comes to sports betting legalization, you might think that there aren't many more states left, considering the number that have adopted it. But a handful of states that don't have casino-style gaming have legalized sports betting and are offering it as a lottery product. So given the involvement of lotteries in that scene, we'll likely see plenty more states having sports betting legalization discussions as we move into 2021. And in that context, many state legislatures are going to be grappling with difficult budgeting conditions in upcoming sessions. We think it's likely that states will gravitate towards gambling expansion as a way to shore up some short-term revenue, just an easier political lift than, say, raising broad-based tax rates. We saw this when states responded to the Great Recession as well. At least 8 states expanded casino gambling or lottery offerings to close budget gaps between fiscal years 2010 and 2012, according to our data. And there also seems to be an appetite for gambling expansion among the general public as well. In addition to the 3 states I mentioned that just approved sports betting, Colorado voters paved the way for expanded betting limits and new games in the recent elections. Voters in Nebraska also legalized casino gambling. And then in 2020 sessions, we also saw a number of states that do not have casino gaming and consider legalizing it, and that included several southern states like Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky. So a significant component of the national discussions around gaming expansion is internet gambling. Most states do not allow it. Of the 45 states with lotteries, only 11 allow some form of internet play, either allowing tickets to be purchased over the internet or offering lottery subscriptions. Of the 26 states with commercial casino gambling, internet gambling, which is casino games other than sports betting, has been legalized in only 6 states in the Virgin Islands. One of the commonly cited reasons for choosing not to embrace internet gambling, there are 2 that seem to be the most prevalent. One is the potential for an increase in gambling addiction issues, and the other is the concern that online gaming could rob brick and mortar casinos and surrounding establishments of visitors and revenue. That second fear no longer appears to be as widespread across the casino industry, and there are many stakeholders that are now pointing to evidence that internet gambling could actually help casinos. Those who are more inclined to bet online tend to be younger, not necessarily as interested in traditional forms of gambling as previous generations. iGaming may offer an opportunity to appeal to a broader market. And it's states that have turned to iLottery games in recent years saw record revenues leading up to the pandemic. So up until this point, states have largely approached mobile sports betting in isolation from other forms of gambling, although there are a few exceptions with Pennsylvania, Michigan, and West Virginia. But the number of states that approves mobile sports betting seems like a bit of a harbinger in terms of that other forms of internet gaming will likely be given more consideration in the years to come. But specifically on the mobile gaming front, in 14 states, DC and Puerto Rico, intrastate mobile sports betting has been implemented or authorized, so bettors can place wagers on a phone or computer. Of the 11 sports betting states that have not broadly legalized mobile betting, the 3 states with hatch shading here, Mississippi, Montana, and Washington, all have they technically have mobile gaming, but it's only available on casino premises. So if we look at the states with how mobile sports betting are performing revenue-wise, the initial data seems to strongly suggest that mobile betting brings in more of it. Of the 11 sports betting states that have not legalized mobile betting, 3 are states that just legalized it and have not yet decided on a mobile component. 3 are tribal-only gaming states, and Montana doesn't have much recent data available that I can find. So that leaves us with Arkansas, Delaware, and New York as other non-mobile states with data to look at. Arkansas started offering sports betting in the summer of 2019. Fiscal year 2020 tax collections were about $250,000 for sports betting. New York is generating a tiny percentage of the sports betting activity in neighboring states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania, which we'll show you next. Less than $1 million in New York in the first year of sports betting there, which began in 2019, July 2019. Delaware is doing a bit better. That may be partly attributable to the fact that the state offers sports wagering at a handful of racinos in the state. And it also has a sports lottery game, which is available at 100 different retailers throughout the state. So more widely available in comparison to these other 2 states. They also have a very high tax rate in Delaware, almost 50%. Here in Mississippi, brought in a little over $4.5 million in fiscal year 2020. So, on the whole, for all these states, these are helpful amounts, but not life-changing revenues, really. And, regardless of how sports betting is carried out, it's not going to be a huge amount of tax revenue. It's relatively low margin venture compared to other types of gaming. Most wagers are paid out as prizes, and it does not result with a lot of taxable profits. Still, the revenue was one of the big motivators for legalizing it in most states. And from that perspective, mobile sports betting does seem like it would help. So here are some states that have mobile sports betting. From the outset, it should be said that the disparity between mobile and retail sports betting revenues was exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic, since casinos were closed for a good chunk of the year and could not offer it. Online play was still available during lockdown months, so mobile sports betting revenues were much more buoyant compared to the retail numbers, which were non-existent. But the mobile numbers dropped as well in earlier months, and they continued to outpace retail numbers once casinos reopened, and dramatically so in some cases. So here's looking at New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Indiana. In all 3 of these states, the mobile sports betting numbers are pretty striking. The lion's share of sports betting activity is taking place on mobile platforms, as you can see the comparison between retail and mobile here. In New Jersey, which currently has the largest sports betting market, brought in roughly $35 million in tax revenue just year to date. Mobile betting has accounted for the vast majority of the total wagered in the state, over 90%. In Pennsylvania, the state brought in a total of $38.7 million in state tax revenue in fiscal year 2020. Roughly 3/4 of that was attributable to mobile sports betting. In Indiana, which launched sports betting at the start of 2020, revenue from mobile gaming accounted for 60% of the total receipts. And that share appears to be growing month by month. These numbers are total sports betting receipts. State tax rates on that would be more like $6.5 million through fiscal year 2020, but they didn't implement it until several months into that fiscal year. So more like probably 10 million would be a better estimate for them. And then not pictured are also states like New Hampshire and Colorado, which are largely deriving most of their sports betting revenue from mobile platforms as well. These next 3 states, mobile sports betting has not overwhelmingly dominated the retail numbers like in the other states. In Iowa, mobile sports betting was a little over half of the total revenue in fiscal year 2020, but it is steadily increasing and is currently 61% of total wagers after the first third of fiscal year 2021. In Rhode Island, mobile sports betting has been a bit less productive as well, provided about 20% of total book revenue in fiscal year 2020. That's grown to about 42.5% in fiscal year 2021, and that's due to a change that I'll discuss in a moment. And then Nevada as well. They're the only state that's has serious sports betting operations up and running for decades. They only started reporting the revenue breakdown between mobile sports wagering and retail operations at the start of 2020. You can see that the mobile gaming does not generate nearly as much relative to retail, at least in comparison with states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania. In a typical month, it's about a fifth to a third of total sports betting revenues. In Nevada's case, the fact that it has less mobile relative to other states might be because physical casinos are just a bigger attraction in that state. However, they do have something in common with Rhode Island and Iowa in that all of these states have required in-person registration at casinos in order to set up mobile gaming accounts. This is a responsible gaming measure that most of the mobile sports betting states have not adopted. The rationale for putting it in place is to help prevent underage gambling or unauthorized users, but it does have the potential to dampen revenues. Gaming industry research suggests that prospective gamblers find in-person registration to be inconvenient and even prohibitive in some cases. Rhode Island initially did require in-person registrations, but it let go of it. That required over the summer, and that was due partly to COVID concerns, but also because revenues were underperforming. And it's probably not a coincidence that mobile sports betting revenue performance has improved in recent months there. Iowa as well, their in-person registration requirement will end soon. It was only in place for the first 18 months. There are other ways states are using to try to eliminate illicit or fraudulent gambling. There are usually other forms of ID verification. Sign-up processes typically require a meaningful amount of personal info like social security numbers. In Oregon, for example, within 30 days of initial registration, the lottery must be able to verify the individual's identity. The player may need to provide additional documentation through the lottery or third party, including but not limited to government-issued photo ID or proof of address documentation. Additional age verification technology exists as well. Several states that allow internet lottery ticket sales have used this in lieu of requiring in-person ticket purchases. All the states with mobile gaming use geolocation technology, which determines a person's location based on their IP address and network connection parameters and ensures that bets can only be placed within state borders. The relationship between mobile gaming and gambling addiction is a bit outside my wheelhouse, but it does stand to reason that making gambling opportunities more readily available will potentially lead to more people making unfortunate decisions with their personal finances, despite whatever guardrails are in place to try to mitigate that. A lot of states have set reporting requirements for mobile vendors or taken other measures to try to ensure responsible gambling. Some are requiring vendors to submit responsible gaming plans and accounting controls. I don't know much about the technology, but I believe it's possible to detect unusual or overly frequent wagering activity or otherwise set limits on the number or amount of wagers within a certain time period. Most states also have voluntary self-exclusion lists that people can place themselves on. In Michigan, for example, the Gambling Control Board is authorized to create a statewide responsible gaming database that identifies individuals who are prohibited from establishing an internet sports betting account based on certain criteria. It's also pretty common in gambling expansion efforts to devote some of that expansion revenue to state-sponsored gambling addiction programs as well. Here are the sports betting tax rates in the states, just for the sake of comparison. In general, the tax rates for retail and mobile sports betting operations are the same. New Jersey is unique in that it charges a higher rate for mobile betting. I suspect that was put in place to give a bit of an advantage to the casinos in Atlantic City. The tax rates are really all over the map. A few of the states with lottery run operations take half of the overall revenue or more. Pennsylvania gets more than a third of all revenues. 9 states are between 10 and 20%. Or below 10%. There's always a lot of conversation around the appropriate tax rate to set. You want to strike a balance between raising revenue, ensuring that you can still draw people away from the black market. At this point, when there's so many new markets being established, it's hard to say, hard to see any relationship between tax rates and revenue performance at this point in time. Whether a state offers mobile sports betting or not seems to be a more important predictor of revenue performance at this time. Also, just a comparison of some state licensing fees. Again, no real differences for brick and mortar and online operators in the states. And Mr. Chairman, this concludes my brief review of the state of play. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to present for you all, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Jackson. I've had a few people ask, and so if you haven't already sent that to Anna Moak, I think there are a few people who would like to get a hard copy of your presentation. It had a lot of good information in it, so if you would do that, please. Are there any members of the committee with any questions? Okay, then I have just a few real quick. I think I heard you, this is something that I'm very interested in, and I heard you mention it, and I'd like to have you expound on it. The effect of mobile sports betting on existing in-person casinos and what it might do to their business model if people are able to bet remotely.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about what you know about that?
You know, I'm not an economist, so I don't have the expertise to say for sure. I will say that I've sat in on webinars with the National Council of Gaming States, seen other operators present statistics that suggest that it expands the market size and is not necessarily that to the extent that people will not go to the casino to place bets and opt for mobile betting as well. There are also, it can help the casinos that are operating mobile sports betting platforms for one, and then if you have the in-person registrations, you can convince them to come in and visit the casinos as well. But from what the economic studies that are out there are saying right now, it seems that mobile sports betting grows the gambling pie rather than just shifts it all.
If you have any of that, if you would please share that with us as well. That's something, as a state with casinos and people working in casinos, that's important for us. Any other questions for Mr. Brainerd? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We have a little bit of a break. We're going to take a break for lunch and let people do any work they need to do over the lunch hour. We will be reconvene at 1:30. So if I could get a motion from Senator Thompson that moves that we stand in recess until 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you.